भगवते वासुदेवाय नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरये नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु नित्यं भागवत सेवा भगवति उत्तम श्लोके भवति नैष्ठिके. So continuing with the discussion on Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, today we are starting a new chapter, chapter number 25, the descriptions of the characteristics of King Puranjana. Text number 1. Matra vacha iti sandishya bhagavan barhishadar abhipujita pasyatam rajaputranam tatraivantar haraha. The great sage Maitreya continued speaking to Vidura. My dear Vidura, in this way Lord Shiva instructed the sons of King Barhishat. The sons of the king also worshipped Lord Shiva with great devotion and respect. Finally, Lord Shiva became invisible to the princess. This chapter contains a great lesson concerning the monarchical kingdom in the days of yore. When King Barhishat was considering retiring from the royal duties, he sent his sons to perform austerities in order to become perfect kings for the welfare of the citizens. At the same time, King Barhishat was being instructed by the great sage Narad about the material world and the living entity who wants to enjoy it. It is therefore very clear how the kings and the princes were trained to take charge of a kingdom. Welfare activities for the benefit of the citizens were aimed at understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The human form of life is especially meant for understanding God, our relationship with Him, and our activities in His service. Because the kings took charge of the spiritual education of the citizens, both the king and the citizens were happy in Krishna consciousness. In this regard, we should remember that the monarchical hierarchy of Prachin Barhishat comes from Maharaj Dhruva, a great devotee of the Lord and the most celebrated disciple of Narad Muni. King Prachin Barhishat was then too much engaged in fruitive activities due to performing different types of yagyas. One can actually be promoted to higher planetary systems or to the heavenly kingdoms by performing various yagyas, but there is no question of liberation or going back to Godhead. When the great sage Narad saw that a descendant of Maharaj Dhruva was being misled by fruitive activities, Narad took compassion upon him and personally came to instruct him about the ultimate benediction of life, Bhakti Yoga. How Narad Muni indirectly introduced the Bhakti Yoga system to King Prachin Barhishat is very interestingly described in this 25th chapter. So now Narad Muni, because his disciple was Maharaj Dhruva and who was a great devotee of the Lord, and Maharaj Prachin Barhishat, as we studied earlier, he was doing too many yagyas, but all Karma Kanda yagyas. So his idea was to enjoy in this lifetime and after this lifetime, go to heavenly kingdoms and enjoy over there. And his sons, they were instructed by Lord Shiva himself about devotion service. So Narad Muni now, he took compassion upon Prachin Barhishat. And he said, let me go and teach him about devotion service. So this is the compassionate nature of a Vaishnava devotee. He doesn't care for himself. He just still goes and teaches about devotion service to everybody and anybody and tries to bring them back to Godhead. Because this is what the Lord wants. This is what pleases the Lord when we go and preach. And Narad Muni, he's a spiritual master of the whole universe, actually. He goes everywhere. He's roaming around and preaching. or singing the glories of the Lord or preaching. That's all he does. Beautiful service he does. And somehow, see, this is the misfortune of our culture these days, that in Hindi movies and the serials, they portray his personality in such a wrong way, in such a comedic way and wrong way. It's just ridiculous. Narad Muni is a spiritual master of the whole universe, spiritual master of Ved Vyas, spiritual master of Dhruv Maharaj. Here, Prachin Barishat he is preaching to, Prahlad Maharaj he'll preach to later on. So many devotees he has preached. And he's still preaching. He's roaming around everywhere and preaching. But his character and his persona is just very negatively introduced and portrayed in Hindi movies. I don't know about Southern movies, but Hindi movies definitely. And it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You should have full respect for Narad Muni. Rudragitam Bhagavataha Stotram Sarve Prachetasah Japantaste Tapaste Pur Varshanam Ayutam Jale. All the Pracheta princes simply stood in the water for 10,000 years and recited the prayers given to them by Lord Shiva. Of course, in the modern age, one may be amazed how the princes could stand in the water for 10,000 years. However, living within air or living within water is the same process. One simply has to learn how to do it. The aquatics live within water for their whole lifespan. Certain favorable conditions are created to enable them to live within water. In those days, however, people used to live for 100,000 years. Out of so many years, if one could spare 10,000 years for the sake of austerity, he would be assured of success in his future life. This was not very astonishing. Although such a feat is impossible in this age, it was quite possible in Satya Yuga. In fact, in Dwapar Yuga, also towards the end of Dwapar Yuga, when the battle of Mahabharata was going on, and towards the end of the battle, Duryodhana also went underwater, and he just did some tapasya there. And when Pandavas came looking for him, then he came out, and then he had the final battle with Bhimsen, and where Bhimsen broke his thighs. So these yogis, they could figure out. Actually, there was a Sobri Muni also. He was doing tapasya underwater in the Yamuna near Vrindavan. And he did for many years. So of course, it's not that easy, but what they would do is stop breathing. Somehow they would merge the incoming and outgoing air, and they would basically stop breathing. So once you stop breathing, even underwater, it is still uncomfortable. I'm not saying it's very easy, but somehow yogis could do that. And underwater they went because nobody would disturb them over there, especially at that Mansarovar lake where they're going to do this tapasya. Prachin barhi kshatam kshattah karma swasaktam manasam narado adhyatma tattvagyaha kripalu pratyabhodayat. While the princes were undergoing severe austerities in the water, their father was performing different types of fruitive activities. At this time, the great saint Narad, master and teacher of all spiritual life, became very compassionate upon the king and decided to instruct him about spiritual life. As pointed out by Prabodhanand Saraswati Thakur, a great devotee of Lord Chaitanya, Kaivalya, emerging into Brahman effulgence is just like going to hell. He similarly states that elevation to the upper planetary systems for the enjoyment of heavenly life is just so much phantasmagoria. This means that a devotee does not give any importance to the ultimate goal of the karmis and jnanis. The ultimate goal of the karmis is promotion to the heavenly kingdom, and the ultimate goal of the jnanis is merging into the Brahman effulgence. Of course, the jnanis are superior to the karmis as confirmed by Lord Chaitanya. One jnani or impersonalist is better than many thousands of fruitive actors. Therefore, a devotee never enters upon the path of karma or elevation by fruitive activities. Because this elevation, going to heavenly planets and then coming down again, Shine Punne Marte Lokam Vishanti, it's just wastage of time. That's all it is. So jnanis are still better in the sense, at least they're on the path of spiritual progress. So if by mercy of a devotee, they can come out of Gyan way and become a devotee, it's always better. Narad Muni took compassion upon King Prachin Barhishat when he saw the king engaged in fruitive activity. In comparison to mundane workers, those who are trying to be elevated to the higher planetary systems by performing yagyas are undoubtedly superior. In pure devotional service, however, both karma and jnana are considered bewildering features of the illusory energy. Shreyastvam katmad rajan karmanatman ihase dukhahani sukhavapti shreyastanne cheshyate. Narad Muni asked King Prachin Barhishat, "My dear king, what do you desire to achieve by performing these fruitive activities?" The chief aim of life is to get rid of all miseries and enjoy happiness. But these two things cannot be realized by fruitive activity. In this material world, there is great illusion which covers the real intelligence. A man in the mode of passion wants to work very hard to derive some benefit. But he does not know that time will never allow him to enjoy anything permanently. Compared with the work one expends, the gain is not so profitable. And even if it is profitable, it is not without any distresses. If a man is not born rich and he wants to purchase a house, cars, and other material things, he has to work hard day and night for many years in order to possess them. Thus, happiness is not attained without undergoing some distress. So even if somebody is born rich, means in his previous life he has performed many austerities. Actually, pure happiness cannot be had within this material world. If we wish to enjoy something, we must suffer for something else. On the whole, suffering is the nature of this material world. And whatever enjoyment we are trying to achieve is simply illusion. After all, we have to suffer the miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death. We may discover many fine medicines, but it's not possible to stop the sufferings of disease or death. And right now, with this coronavirus, all the medicines are also failing. Nothing is working. Actually, medicine is not the counteracting agent for either disease or death. On the whole, there is no happiness in this material world. But an illusion person works very hard for so-called happiness. Indeed, this process of working hard is actually taken for happiness. This is called illusion. Prabhupada's purports are amazing. They really hit you on the right spot. So, so whatever process we have undertaken, the austerities, the sufferings we undergo to achieve some material possessions, thinking this could make me happy. And Prabhupada says this is all illusion. Maya. Maya means which is not, that which is not. So we think there is happiness, but there is no happiness. Suppose we work hard and then we take a loan, because these days loans are so much in fashion. And we buy a nice car. All these years, these many years, we were collecting to make the down payment and then making sure we can pay the EMIs. And then we buy a car, nice car. And we were so much of anticipating, we'll get a car and then we'll do this, we'll do that. Life will be so great. And once we get the car at home, how long? I mean, we all have had, I'm pretty sure, this experience of buying car. How long were we really, really, really happy that we got the car? We can just ask ourselves. And similarly, other things. Okay, car is a commodity. It's a good thing to have as a mode of transportation, but that's about it. But we think our happiness depends upon the car. But once a car came, now suppose we bought Santro and the neighbor has Ford or somebody else has Mercedes, then we're not happy. How come he has the Ford car? His car is much better than my car. And we are not happy. Actually, we were other day, we were discussing, some of us are together from school time, so school friends. Somehow we got together on WhatsApp and we were discussing. That time we didn't have anything actually when we were going to school. All we had was a cycle. That's what we used to go to school for. And school was really far, at least 5-6 miles away. Not kilometers, miles. So, and we are discussing, we hardly had any money in our pocket. And we just go on cycle to the school, and that was our happiness. We just enjoy that. And now even cars are there, big homes are there, still people are not happy. So actually one cannot be happy in this material. Even though we're working so hard to gather so many things. Possessions we have. It's a fact. More people will be either our parents or maybe close relatives or very close friends. Very, very close friends. But he will become envy. Therefore, Narad Muni asked King Prachin Barhishat what he desired to attain by performing so many costly sacrifices. Even if one attains a heavenly planet, he cannot avoid the distresses of birth, old age, disease, and death. Someone may argue that even devotees have to undergo many distresses in executing austerities and penances connected with devotional service. Of course, for the neophytes, the routine of devotional service may be very painful, but at least they have the hope that they will ultimately be able to avoid all kinds of distresses and achieve the highest perfectional stage of happiness. For the common karmis, there is no such hope, because even if they're promoted to the higher planetary systems, They're not guaranteed freedom from the miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death. Even Lord Brahma, who is situated in the highest planetary system, Brahmaloka, has to die. Lord Brahma's birth and death may be different from an ordinary man's, but within this material world, he cannot avoid the distresses of birth, old age, disease, and death. If one is at all serious about attaining liberation from these miseries, he must take to devotion service. This is confirmed by the Lord himself. One who knows the transcendental nature of my appearance and activities does not, upon leaving the body, take his birth again in this material world, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Thus, after attaining full Krishna consciousness, the devotee does not return to this material world after death. He goes back home, back to Godhead. That is a perfect stage of happiness, unblemished by any trace of distress. So the material world is full of miseries. Padam padam yat vipadam natesha dukkhalyam ashashvatam. And the soul wants real happiness, real, permanent, and always increasing happiness. That's only possible in the spiritual world, nowhere else, or in the spiritual practices, devotion service. So we have to work on this process. And actually these chapters, next 3 or 4 chapters, that really will bring detachment from this material world. So we just follow it nicely. Text 5. Rajuvacha na janami mahabhaga param karma viddadhi bruhi me vimalam jnanam yen muchyeya karmabhi. The king replied, O great soul Narad, my intelligence is entangled in fruitive activities. Therefore, I do not know the ultimate goal of life. Kindly instruct me in pure knowledge so that I can get out of the entanglement of fruitive activities. So just by little association with Narad Muni, even the king's heart changed completely. So far, he was doing so many yagyas. He had done so many yagyas. It was said that one yagya would end and he would start another one, and then another one. But just by little association with Narad Muni, he's saying, I do not know the ultimate goal of life. Please instruct me. Sri Narottam Das Thakur has sung, Satsanga Chadi Kaino Asate Vilas Te Karane Lagila Ye Karma Bandha Fas. As long as a person is entangled in fruitive activities, he is bound to accept one body after another. This is called karma bandha fas, entanglement in fruitive activities. It doesn't matter whether one is engaged in pious or impious activities, for both are causes of further entanglement in material bodies. By pious activities, one can take birth in a rich family and get a good education and a beautiful body, but this does not mean that the distresses of life are ultimately eliminated. In the Western countries, it's not unusual for one to take birth in a rich aristocratic family, nor is it unusual for one to have good education and a very beautiful body. But this does not mean that Westerners are free from the distresses of life. But at the same time, even in Western countries, people can have poor families and ugly bodies and no education. That can also happen. Although at the present moment, the younger generation in Western countries has sufficient education, beauty, and wealth, and although there is enough food, clothing, and facilities for sense gratification, they are in distress. So this is hippie time. Indeed, they are so distressed that they become hippies. And the laws of nature force them to accept a wretched life. Thus they go about unclean and without shelter or food, and they're forced to sleep in the street. It can be concluded that one cannot become happy by simply performing pious activities. It's not a fact that those who are born with a silver spoon in their mouth are free from the material miseries of birth, old age, disease, and death. The conclusion is that one cannot be happy by simply executing pious or impious activities. Such activities simply cause entanglement and transmigration from one body to another. Narottam Das Thakur calls this karma bandha fast. So everybody is suffering, going through these distresses, four miseries: birth, old age, disease, and death. And nobody wants to get old, get diseased, or die. King Prachin Barhishat admitted that this fact and frankly asked Narad Muni how he could get out of this karma bandha fast, entanglement in fruitive activities. This is actually the stage of knowledge indicated in the first verse of Vedanta Sutra, Athata Brahma Jigyasa. Means now in the human form of life, somehow or other, you have achieved this human form of life. Try to find out the goal of life. When one actually reaches the platform of frustration in an attempt to discharge karma bandha fast, he inquires about the real value of life, which is called Brahma Jigyasa. In order to inquire about the ultimate goal of life, the Vedas enjoin tad vijnanartham sagurum eva vikachet. In order to understand the transcendental science, one must approach a bona fide spiritual master. King Prachin Barhishat found the best spiritual master, Narad Muni, and he therefore asked him about that knowledge by which one can get out of the entanglement of karma bandha fast. This is the actual business of human life. Jivasya tattva jigyasa. As stated in second chapter of first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, a human being's only business is inquiring from a bona fide spiritual master about extrication from the entanglement of karma bandha fast. How I can get out of this entanglement of fruitive activities. But how many people are interested in asking this question, and how many people ask this question, and how many people follow on the path once they ask this question, how to get out, and how many of them follow it seriously? It's a very little percentage. So by mercy of Prabhupada, blessings of him, we are reading his purports and trying to get serious about a spiritual life. So these next few chapters, not just verses, chapters, are very, very good chapters to learn more about detachment. So anyway, I'll stop here. See anybody has any questions or comments? Okay, so we'll stop here. You all have a safe and wonderful day. Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna. Jai Shri